DanDaDan, 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 DanDaDan. Sorry, I was only trying to say the title once, but with an OP this catchy, that's easier said than done. Science Saru's adaptation of Yukinobu Tatsu's hit supernatural comedy manga feels like the freshest shonen battle thing in years, because it's not a shonen battle thing. It's a rom-com with shonen battle elements. And the beats and bars that Creepy Nuts spun together for its OP are somehow even fresher than that. Let's be real, for the last month, none of us have been able to get them out of our head. Their theme song, Otonoke, is so damn catchy, your head was probably bobbing too much to even catch all the subtle foreshadowing and symbolism that OP director Abel Gongora packed into the credits all around it. But I did. And as a professional anime OP stuff noticer, I'm here to share my findings with you, which clearly, just looking at this timeline, I've got a lot of, almost as many as I did for Chainsaw Man's OP, so I'm just gonna jump right into analyzing everything, except for a few small details which I've chosen to save for a clearly marked spoiler section at the end, so you anime-onlys can safely avoid them. That said, DanDaDan, DanDaDan, DanDaDan is first and foremost a character-driven story that doesn't really have any big twists to spoil, just some surprising developments and lore reveals, so I wouldn't worry too much about those either way. Reflecting that, this OP puts its characters front and center in its opening refrain, mixed in with a barrage of stylized Dan motion graphics in English and Kana, cropped from various sources like computer programs, street signs, and even a danger sign, which appropriately comes right after the first shot of Ira Shiratori looking cute and innocent. But let's back up a step. Each set of character close-ups between those title bumpers reflects a different key moment in DanDaDan's narrative, starting with the hilarious argument between Okarun and Momo that drags them both into the world of the occult to begin with. He cocks a challenging eyebrow over his glasses, daring her to insult his alien obsession again with her silly talk of ghosts, and instead of walking away, she whips her head back around to meet him with a defiant The color grading adds a further layer of symbolism to that first shot by transforming Okarun's glasses into two golden orbs representing his spicy meatballs, which of course will be removed just like he removes his glasses as a direct result of this argument. After the next bumper, Seiko gives us a side eye as she leans in and lights up, the flame sending impressively detailed shadows across her face and sparkles down her swinging hoop earrings. I believe this represents her interrogating Okarun about whether he's really gotten his banana back, because if the symbolism with his glasses is a consistent thing, then the next shot of him framing each lens in turn could likewise be taken to represent him searching for both of those missing meatballs. And of course, the first one was found by Ira, who appears in the very next shot, swiftly shifting from a cute smile to a mocking tongue-out wink that perfectly encapsulates her nice mean girl persona. The next set of shots brings the focus back to Okarun and Momo's relationship, which grows ever more complicated as their feelings for each other deepen. He massages his forehead as his face contorts into a frustrated, contemplative pout, wondering exactly what she's thinking, while she averts her gaze from him, running an adorably nervous hand through her hair. This dynamic is then further complicated by the introduction of Gigi, who looks like a cool hot dude for exactly 2 frames before firing off a finger gun and revealing what a lovable goober he really is. Perhaps too lovable for Okarun's taste, who casts an extremely nervous glance between him and Momo. Or at least that's how I interpret that reaction. The sight of Seiko confidently chomping down on a lollipop with a conspicuously symbolic gold ball at its end may also be what's making him nervous, and hey buddy, me too. Though I'm fairly certain the last 3 shots of her, Ira, and Turbo Granny are just here to round out the cast introductions and highlight more of their personalities before the title drop. Ira, for instance, gets to show off her chronic main character syndrome by flashing a peace sign that says, "I was specifically chosen to protect the world 'cause I'm cute to the max." And Turbo Granny beautifully demonstrates the range of her default personality by shifting from a no bitches angle to to regarding the viewer, or possibly reacting to Ira, with barely restrained contempt. By the way, every time we see Turbo Granny in this OP, she's gonna be color-coded red, which here provides a clue to first-time viewers as to what exactly might be possessing that Maneki Neko. That brings us to the title card, which appears over a rapidly descending shot of the solar system before spiraling into the silhouette of the Earth after the camera comes to rest there. The corona around our planet then transforms into Turbo Granny's eye, hinting at one of those few minor spoilers that I mentioned earlier, so we'll save talking about that for the end of the video. And I guess that makes this as good a spot as any to take a quick break and tell you that this video is brought to you by Overlord: The Sacred Kingdom, only in theaters November 8th, and the Lord of Nazarick mobile game. Overlord: The Sacred Kingdom is a feature-length follow-up to the events of Season 4, furthering the diabolical schemes of Ainz Ul Gon to take over the world, in a big screen spectacle that takes the series' epic battle scenes to the next level. With a richly built dark fantasy setting, an even darker sense of humor, and a wonderful cast of characters, Overlord is some of the most fun I've had watching anime, and this movie's self-contained plot makes it a perfect option to share that fun with your fantasy-loving friends and family. If you need to catch up or just want a refresher before the movie, you can watch all 4 seasons of Overlord and both OVAs on Crunchyroll, or you can experience the story a whole new way in Lord of Nazarick, which lets you collect an army of your favorite characters from throughout the anime and use your own strategic wits to navigate its most memorable battles, all brought to life with stunningly animated, cel-shaded 3D graphics. Or, if you're really confident in your strategy, you can take your party into the PvP arena and forge an alliance with your friends to go to war for exclusive rewards. Speaking of, Crunchyroll members can get even more benefits by logging in with their account. And for an added bonus, the Crunchyroll store has a great selection of Overlord figures, Nendoroids, novels, manga, plush, and home video, which are all 10% off until November 8th. 15% off for Crunchyroll members. You'll also get a free collectible art card with any Overlord manga purchase. Get your tickets now for Overlord: The Sacred Kingdom at my link in the doobly-doo, and use my other link to start playing Lord of Nazarick on iOS or Android today. After the title, the OP shifts into an abstract shadow puppet style to show us silhouettes of the various monsters of the week that our heroes will fight throughout the series, in tribute to the very first opening sequence of that most classic Monster of the Week series, Ultraman. I'd like to thank Taco over on Twitter for pointing that out, since I'm not nearly Tokusatsu-pilled enough myself to get the reference, as well as My Lord Chaos in the replies for pointing out that the big lips and black and white patterns of the Serpoians were clearly inspired by the alien Dada race from that same classic TV show. I do, however, know enough to recognize that the pose the Serpoians strike to use their psychic powers is distinctly reminiscent of Ultraman's own Spacium beam, and you don't really need any Tokusatsu knowledge to recognize the artificial bananas that appear in their place when the lights blink out. Shoot. Am I gonna have to make a Patreon cut of this video? As those disappear, the Flatwoods monster comes looming out of the darkness to replace them, winding up for a sumo stomp that turns the lights back on and gives us a better look at his silhouette. After a second, though, the color shifts once again, leaving us staring at his spooky, scary skeleton, which is all that's left behind after he's burned alive by Seiko's barrier. After that, the bound spirit of the tunnel comes snipping its way in, looming intimidatingly behind the credits for a second, before another color shift reveals all the tortured souls of abused young girls trapped within its monstrous carapace. Then we get perhaps the slickest reference in the whole OP, when Momo leaps in to throw a spinning kick at the monsters, and on impact the frame freezes for just a moment, turning her tilted earring into Ultraman's oblong eye. And at the same time as the animation is calling out its most direct inspiration, the lyrics of the theme song are calling out the most direct inspiration for DanDaDan itself. Packed with ghosts like Sada-chan and Kaya-chan, this land of the dead is a wonderland. As Epi pointed out in their excellent Twitter thread analyzing this song's lyrics, that bar refers to Sadako vs. Kayako, or The Ring vs. The Grudge, a horror comedy crossover film that's a favorite of both Tatsu and Chainsaw Man's Tatsuki Fujimoto, which also happens to be the first spark for the idea that became DanDaDan. Searching his notebook for manga ideas that his editor wouldn't reject, Tatsu stumbled upon one simply saying that that movie was interesting, and going from that impulse, he went on to add yokai and aliens and whatnot to its idea of ghosts fighting ghosts to give us what we ultimately have. I highly encourage you to go check out Epi's thread when this video's over, by the way. There is some really interesting stuff in the second verse, which obviously we're not going to get to because that's not in the OP, where it calls out a bunch of different Jump manga, and just a way cooler song than you might think. We then cut to Turbo Granny stalking toward us, sinister red eyes glaring out of her violently shifting silhouette, which is easily the most animated monster we're gonna see in this OP, and she leaves an even more striking impression as the color shifts and we freeze frame on her wild-eyed glare. And zooming into those eyes reveals exactly what she's glaring at. Okarun, who pulls his glasses back from the camera to put them on, their glare shifting to obscure his eyes and turning them into yellow orbs that kind of mirror the red ones that glared out of her silhouette before he shifts back to silhouette himself. In the show, whenever his glasses take on this look, it's a symbol of the barrier that he puts up to push others away, kind of exactly like what that same Gendo glasses effect represents on Gendo in Evangelion, come to think of it. And in keeping with that, as the camera pulls back, his silhouette is as stiff and awkward as we'll ever see him. Though he quickly loses that composure at the same time as he loses his balls, striking the same pose as he does when he runs to inform Momo that they're missing. With them gone and Turbo Granny's faint blue soul pushed out of his body, he's able to take her power for his own, though. His silhouette dissolving and morphing into a bestial mass of shadow and teeth before his eyes and sinister granny grin emerge to rush at the viewer. From that jump scare, we jump to the most chill and atmospheric, but also perplexing sequence in this whole OP. A series of 4 gorgeously detailed landscape shots with supernatural elements lurking at their fringes, interspersed with shots of Momo twisting her real and then spiritual hands as she reaches up toward the sky. We'll get to those bits in a sec though. Now, 2 of these landscapes I instantly recognized. The most obvious being Turbo Granny's tunnel, based on the real-life Inunaki tunnel, which has a reputation for being haunted due to all the real horrible crimes that have happened in and around it. So maybe skip that one if you ever do an anime location pilgrimage or whatever. Interestingly, the lyric that plays over this shot speaks of pain overlapping, which could be a reference to the pain of all the different girls that make up the bound spirit trapped within the tunnel. The rice fields near Granny Seiko's shrine are likewise pretty easily recognizable, and the alien planet that appears out of the thunderstorm above them brings to mind the big squad of alien soldiers that ambushes Okarun there in the inciting incident of the Space Globalists arc. If you're familiar with that arc, then you might also see how the lyric, "The fog lifted as I crawled desperately out," could reflect the experience of a certain alien character upon reaching Earth. But if that interpretation's correct, then that puts the possibility on the table that the rest of these shots might be referencing parts of the story that the anime isn't gonna get to for ages, and even having read the manga, I can't for the life of me figure out what the other 2 are, since neither the tall staircase nor the broken torii gate with the big ball behind it match any images I can remember from the manga. They could even be foreshadowing stuff that Tatsu has planned but hasn't written yet. For instance, a popular theory on the Japanese web suggests the tall staircase could be the one leading up to Kifune Shrine, a site famously associated with the Ushi no Koku Mairi curse ritual, which is as likely as anything to serve as a basis for a future DanDaDan arc, but the stairs in the anime don't have lanterns around them, and the stairs in real life run up beside a pretty steep hill, so I don't know if I buy that interpretation. The best guess me and my Twitter followers came up with is that this is the staircase up to the titular house from the Cursed House arc in the distant past before the land around it was properly developed, and that would explain all the eyeballs all over the trees. They could be representations of the evil eye's power, and if that's the case, then the lyric I'm inside, etc. could be referencing how the evil eye is trapped inside that house. But until we see that part of the manga animated, that's really just me spitballing. Japanese netizens have also speculated that this split torii gate could be based on a similar one at Ise Jingu Shrine, an important Shinto site dedicated to the sun goddess Amaterasu, where the imperial family pays annual tribute to their heavenly ancestor. And that certainly sounds like the sort of place where Tatsu might write about some sacrilegious, secret, supernatural shenanigans going on, although, again, the real site only bears superficial similarities to what we're seeing in this OP. There's no big ball there, for starters, nor any of the stone structures around it, which more resemble markers you might see at an old Japanese graveyard, and perhaps most significantly, the real torii gate isn't covered in inscrutable alien runes, which suggests that this could be some kind of alien transportation beacon, or possibly, given the manga's other important themes, a shrine or device designed to worship or harness the overwhelming power of the human testicle, and or other similar orb-shaped power sources, I guess. Testicles are more fun, though. Whatever it is, it could still turn out to be located at Ise Jingu, I guess, though probably not since there's no graves there. Besides the split torii gate, it honestly looks way more like Okunoin's cemetery in Koyasan, if anything. Still no big ball there, though. And if you have any other ideas, I'd really appreciate you leaving them in the comments below. This shit's got me stumped. Maybe we'll read some of them on the podcast. Moving back to easier to interpret imagery, the sequence ends with a shot of Okarun wandering around Tokyo with his head buried in his favorite occult magazine, lost in thoughts of aliens while the people around him appear as indistinct silhouettes. But his eyes clear as his attention is drawn upward to the manifestation of Momo's spiritual powers as they reach up to grasp a blue aura, reflecting how she pulls him out of his shell, and they both open each other's eyes to parts of the world they never realized were there. It's also notable, though, that when he looks up, Okarun's standing right next to a power or maybe telephone pole, which means that he'd be looking straight up at the cables running off that pole. And that's significant because, as we'll learn later by watching him interact with a phone line specifically, all spiritual energy naturally follows a spiral pattern. The following shot shows Momo opening her eyes, indicating that she was using her spiritual sense to track that aura, and grabbing whatever it was she was reaching for, which might just have been Turbo Granny's aura, given the context of the next shot after that, which shows Turbo Granny's perspective as she tries to sneak up on Seiko and gets knocked back into her barrier circle. This shot's just a great bit of animation all around, with a very strong sense for the shifting camera perspective, and I really appreciate the little details there, like how it shows the aperture hiding the big pencil inside Seiko's bat. And when the style of the shot shifts back to monochromatic silhouettes, that also suggests that, from Turbo Granny's perspective at least, this other Granny is a monster in her own right. Speaking of Best Cat Girl, we jump to the next shot on a match cut of shorts between the shape of that nail and the hole in the bell on her Maneki Neko collar, which she then swiftly covers by crossing her arms as the camera pulls back to reveal her striking a dramatic pose between a blushing Ira and a grinning Gigi, which she doesn't hold long before popping out with a wink as if to say, yeah, shit for brains, I ship it too. Speaking of ships, the next shot shows a UFO in that Ultraman OP style, beaming down a disguised Serpoian who, after cloning himself with a stupid little dance over the song credit, unleashes his supposedly arousing hypnotic powers. This is obviously a reference to the Serpo's attempted probing of Momo, and in the next shot, we see what a mistake that was, as a psychedelic brain pattern representing her own newly awakened psychic powers blooms out behind her, with the kick that she delivers to his creepy alien dome represented through interpretive dance. Specifically, a dance move from Rihanna's Where Have You Been music video, which is a song about a woman unable to find a man who can please her. Savage. Meanwhile, Gigi and Okarun serve as backup dancers behind her, performing the unmistakably iconic first step of the Carlton from Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Gongoro really showing off his status as a man of global culture here. The OP then match cuts on Momo's leap to an Ultraman character card of the acrobatic Silky as she performs a Sode shot, really hope I pronounced that right, with her deadly hair whirling all around her head. That's followed by Mr. Mantis Shrimp throwing a haymaker uppercut for Chiquitita with quite possibly the coolest credit placement in the whole OP, as befits DanDaDan's hardest working immigrant dad. The way the color shifts in time with Hey in the song is also pretty cool, though not nearly as cool as the next shot, where Nessie's mouth laser animation is synced up with a woo! But even as cool as all of that stuff is, the sequence that follows it is easily my favorite part of the whole OP, both as an animation enjoyer in general and a Science Saru fan specifically. It shows Okarun taking off his shoes, breaking into a run, and transforming into Turbo Granny mode while Momo reaches out with her powers behind him, as if trying to stop him, only for him to slip through her grasp and break away in a wild burst that really makes me wish we had more shonen battle anime focused on speedsters. It's a woefully underutilized power set that has nearly endless potential for badass animated set pieces. But I digress. The coolest thing about this sequence, which you might have noticed leads into Science Saru's studio credit, is how it pays tribute to the studio's entire history. For starters, the sketchy art style is distinctly reminiscent of Ping Pong the Animation, which, small correction to what I said in my top tier anime you can watch in a weekend list, was mainly animated at Tatsunoko Production, not Science Saru, though it was directed by Science Saru's co-founder Masaaki Yuasa. A lot of the animators who worked on it would go on to be Science Saru staff and regulars, and Science Saru did handle all the digital animation for the series as their very first major contracting gig for a TV anime. So, clearly pretty important to them. On top of that, the spiky, abstract shape of Momo's psychic hand in this sequence also reminds me quite distinctly of the beast claws in Yuasa's first ever original series, Kemonozume, which was made at Madhouse years before Science Saru existed, but again, most of the team that worked on it would go on to become core staff at Science Saru, most notably the studio's other co-founder, Onyoung Choi, who moved to Japan shortly before the show entered production. Kemonozume is also notable for being the first time this particular animation team chose to pay homage to the Ultraman OP. So in that sense, this whole sequence is a tribute to that foundational work. Lastly, there's one final freeze frame reference in this sequence, this time with Okarun to balance out Momo's from the start of the OP, and it's not to Ultraman, but rather Science Saru's own most widely known and acclaimed work to date, Devilman Crybaby. Specifically, its most iconically memeable image, the Devilman Run, a pose which Okarun strikes for just one brief second before he really goes all out and his body breaks apart into a blur of dust and shadow, an animalistic incarnation of speed itself. I like to think that this shot is a statement from Science Saru, that with DanDaDan they intend to go above and beyond the heights of all their past work. Leave Devilman in the dust, so to speak. And looking at the show so far, it's hard to argue that they haven't done exactly that. Looking at the OP's lyrics, it's also quite interesting that Okarun bursts forward specifically on the word rhythm, since he'll eventually level up his use of Turbo Granny's powers by learning to harness their innate spiritual rhythm, which might be what's being depicted in the following shot of waves emanating off a burning ball of aura in a rapid pulse. That has to be connected to Turbo Granny in some way, because it leads right into her popping out and unhinging her jaw to take a widescreen clean bite out of the audience, notably the only time we see a monster depicted in this OP in anything other than that Ultraman style, which makes sense since Turbo Granny is one of the main characters. We do go back to that style one more time though for a clever recycling of that UFO animation, this time leading into 4 oddly serene shots of the main teens being carried up in tractor beams, each one placidly accepting their fate as it happens, especially Ira, who spreads her arms wide, ready to embrace the main character moment that she's known was coming all her life. Then the sequence is punctuated with a perfect punchline of the UFO abducting a cow, serving as both a wry nod to classic alien abduction tropes for those who don't know, and as confirmation that one poor sick little boy is gonna get the treatment he needs for those who do. This is followed up by a considerably more menacing shot of a spaceship's underside charging up to fire some other kind of beam, but before it can, Okarun bursts through it, flashing between his normal form and a gorgeously spooky airbrushed silhouette of Granny Mode as he flies in for a punch. Coming in so close, the camera flies into his eye, where we then see him sitting back to back with Momo, her staring at the yokai surrounding them while he looks up at the strange alien orb that hovers above, representing the 2 different worlds that they start the story in. Though soon enough, she leans back into him and tilts her gaze up to the sky, entering his world and causing his vacant expression to shift into subtle surprise as she brushes by his ear and their eyes align. A soft bokeh effect further enhances the intimacy of this shot, drawing all of our focus to the faces of the leads and reminding us what DanDaDan is really all about: romance. Which makes this a perfect note for the OP to go out on. There is a little bit more to that second to last shot, but discussing it will bring us back into minor spoiler territory, so I guess now I finally gotta slap that warning on the screen and give all you skittish anime onlys time to clear out. Though before you do, one last quick reminder to get your tickets for Overlord: The Sacred Kingdom now. You don't want to miss it. And when you download Lord of Nazarick using my other link, don't forget to log in with your Crunchyroll account for a ton of exclusive in-game benefits. Okay, if you're still here after that, I'm assuming I have your blessing to inform you that the alien orb looming over that horde of yokai is an allusion to the supernatural dynamic at the heart of DanDaDan's world building, that yokai, cryptids, and other powerful creatures of folklore are the primary reason Earth hasn't been completely overrun by aliens yet. Also, while a lot of the yokai in that background are either just random representations of the concept of yokai or possibly of Tatsu's future plans, for example, the weird lion thing eating a boat directly behind Momo shows up on the page where Okarun realizes that ghosts are defending Earth from aliens. A few of them are direct depictions of yokai that we know are going to show up later in the anime, specifically 3 of the yokai that lend their powers to our heroes. A Konaki Jiji, or Old Man Baby, which is the basis for the Onbusman that empowers wannabe idol Rin Sawaki, a Kasa Obake, or Umbrella Boy, who lends his powers to his older brother Unji Zuma, and of course, Turbo Granny herself. That does leave out the acrobatic Silky and Evil Eye, but they're both accounted for more subtly behind their hosts, Ira and Gigi, in that shot they share with Turbo Granny. All of the stars surrounding Ira allude to moments when the woman who would become Silky was happy with her daughter, while the rainbow geometric pattern behind Gigi looks an awful lot like the Evil Eye's Evil Eye. Speaking of eyes, as you might have guessed by now, the transition out of the title card with the Earth turning into Turbo Granny's eye is yet another allusion to how the power of yokai protects the Earth from aliens, which also adds a new layer of meaning to the next transition into the Serpoian's grinning mouth, and actually, that's pretty much all the spoilers already. Though, if you'll permit me one last bit of spoilery speculation, if this OP does contain foreshadowing for things we haven't seen yet in the manga, I have a theory about Momo turning into Ultraman. Obviously, they're gonna find some kind of solution eventually to her current predicament of being stuck all tiny fighting other tiny guys. I wonder if the Pikmin beat in the back of the song's foreshadowing for that. Anyway, if that solution ends up giving her the ability to change her size at will, then Momo could end up engaging in future kaiju fights mono a monster, just like Ultraman does. And if that happens, this OP's even more galaxy-brained than any of us realized. Either way though, I'm Geoff Thew, professional anime OP stuff noticer, signing out from my mothership.